All right, welcome to our webinar. In this webinar, we're going to review key strategies for launching a successful professional learning community.
Hold on. There we go.
There we go. All right, so I'm Sandy Alston. I retired 3 years ago after 30 years of being a regular classroom teacher, and I taught elementary schools for 25 years and middle school math for the last 5 years in the classroom. I've worked with ASSISTments part-time for the past 7 years in different capacities, and I've had the pleasure of co-facilitating PLCs with Barbara for the past 2 years. Barbara?
Hi, I'm Barbara Delaney. I am a retired middle school math teacher of 22 years. I've been working with ASSISTments part-time for 16 years, and I participated in the creation and facilitation of this PLC over the last 4 years.
All right, so our goals for this webinar is to familiarize you with the PLC facilitation guide and its components, and to also provide you with implementation launch tips. If you have not had a chance to explore the guide, we will do that in this webinar.
Okay, so wait a minute, let me get my screen all set here. In this 30-minute webinar, we're going to go over parts of the guide and give you some tips. There is a lot more in the guide than we're covering, but we're going to cover some key components. And so the PLC resources are for your use, and they are a result of a 4-year study. Our professional learning communities were all delivered virtually, but they can be used in person as well. The surveys and the facilitator reflection supported the evolution of our best version of the PLC. You may find that you will have to adjust minor things like timing and discussion questions based on the needs of your own participants. And so the purpose of the PLC is for teachers to deepen their knowledge of the features offered by assessments and to make formative assessments data an invaluable part of their math instruction. Among some of the benefits of collaborating with peers is that participants also gain a deeper understanding of how to analyze and use data to inform their future instruction and use assessments effectively in the classroom.
Even as facilitators, we found that there's always something valuable to learn in the PLC. Some participants participated in 2 to 3 cohorts over the past 4 years. The content didn't vary much, but they found, as we did, that there's always something to learn with professional sharing. Most teachers don't get many regular opportunities to share professionally with their peers. This PLC provides a platform for sharing professionally around mathematics and data. And here are a few.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, we just have a few different views how participants felt after our PLC. The structure of the PLC is basically the same for all of the sessions. The first 8 sessions are divided into 4 overarching topics that include assessments, routines, and reports, instructional routines and differentiation, orchestrating discussions through feedback and student work, and also assessments as a tool to engage and motivate the students. Then there are also 2 optional settings at the end of the PLC around the topic of bringing it all together. The overarching goals for participants throughout the PLC are to learn how to establish high expectations for all learners using assessments, learn ways to use data from assessments to inform instruction, including common wrong answers and student details reports, learning ways to construct and deliver effective feedback based on individual student performance on an assignment, learning how to strategically use student work collected via assessments to promote meaningful discourse in the classroom, and also learning how to use assessments to motivate and engage students. I'll turn it over to Barbara now for some key components of the PLC facilitation guide.
So again, as I said before, there are many parts to the facilitation guide. We tried to give you as much support as possible so that you would be able to deliver effectively these sessions. But I'd like to just familiarize you with the key components so that you feel more comfortable. So when you're looking through it all, it's not as overwhelming. So first of all, these are the sections in the guide that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the facilitators to do, the run a show, the PLC session structure and order, session topics, feedback surveys, and facilitator reflection. As I said, there is more built into the guide for your review, but these are key components we wanted to highlight here. And so the facilitator session to do document is your task checklist. Links for the facilitator sessions can be found in the guide and also each session folder. You may want to make your own copy to add to the checklist yourself. So let me just give you a peek at this. When you're in the guide, one thing that's important to note, because there are 30 pages in this document, it seems overwhelming, is that you can get to different places by clicking on these numbers. And so, for instance, structure and order, we can click on that and it brings us right to the structure and order. There's not a back button to go back to the top. You do unfortunately have to go back up to the top, but I found I make myself dizzy if I keep trying to find parts, and it's easier just to go back to this table of contents each time I'm going to look at different things. And so I wanted to show you the facilitators to do document and the two places that it's actually located. So under topics, which is the place I seem to go to the most because it is the place where we list all the links to different things. And you'll notice that there's, for new users, information and an orientation. Those are slightly different. But under topics for each session, these all repeat. We have a session folder. That session folder includes all of these documents, but we've put these here for your quick review. So you can just see, oh, what is it that I have to do for this one? Let me open that in a new tab to show you. So here's my facilitators to do. And it's sort of a checklist of things to do before, when you're launching, and after the PLC. And like I said, all of these things might not pertain to you if you're doing it in person. Some of them you might need to add to the list. You might have to edit it. So it's helpful to make your own copy of this document. Again, that's found here, but it's also found, all of these 3 documents are also found in each session folder. When I open it, you'll see every document you need is in the session folder also. But in the guide, we've placed it, whoops, I went to the wrong place. In the guide, we've placed it easily for you, so you can just give a quick look and not have to open up each folder. Oh, but I went to the wrong link. Structure and order. See, I get dizzy doing this. That's why I go back to the facilitator's reflection, topics again. So again, everything is for quick review is here with links, but all of that's found there. And there's learning goals here. So you can see, oh, at a quick glance, what's the learning goal? One thing we'd like you to consider is where you'll provide a continuous platform for sharing and discussion between the PLC sessions if you do decide to deliver a PLC. There is pre-work for several of the sessions. Often the pre-work discussion is shared as a launch into the next session. We personally at ASSISTments use Slack for our pre-work discussions. Slack's a private channel we use at ASSISTments. And we've had all the teachers join in there for their discussion and their work in between sessions. But we recommend that you create a private discussion forum either in Google Classroom, Google Chat, or some other collaborative platform that is accessible to all of your participants. So session topics with links. So we just talked about this on page 20, and I went right to that. But the session topics is the session folder, which contains all the documents for your session, the session run a show for a quick view of it, the facilitator to do for a quick view of it, the session slide deck, and all session facilitator reflections. And there's only one link for that at the very bottom. So let me show you that, because that's a continuous one. So when you go through all of the sessions, session 3, 4, 5, and we go all the way to the bottom of all of these links, here's the session reflection document. And this is used each time after every session. So I'd like to just talk briefly about these pieces to you. First of all, every single slide deck, every session with the slide deck to present has the same order. So let me just open up a session for you. And I'm going to just go to session 1. And I'm going to go open the folder up, or I can open up the slide deck right here. So I'm going to just go to session 1, and I'm just going to go to the slide deck right here link to show you that we have the same thing each time, and every single session is modeled the same way. And our feedback for our teachers was they liked that it was very predictable format. So we always have a welcome. We always have an icebreaker. We always have a story from the field. We always talk about our goals and norms. Where's my story from the field? Goals and norms. Our story from the field. We have reports highlight after that. This one was talking about routines and structures. Then we highlighted, then we have the main content. And that's what this was all about, was talking about high expectations for learners in this one. That's the topic of the slide deck. And there's all the breakout slides. And then after the main discussion, there's always a comment bringing it all together and talking about it and reflecting on it as a whole group. And then we have key takeaways at the end, and key takeaways for everybody to share what they take away from this session, which sometimes is always the same thing, and sometimes it's something different, which is really always interesting to see what everybody's key takeaway is. And we always have a teacher's lounge, which is sort of a parking lot for questions along the way. The facilitator might collect questions they've noticed have come up in the small group discussions or somewhere else that haven't been addressed. It doesn't have to be around the content of that particular session. It can be anything some teacher wants to know or ask opinions from other people. We also revisit in Teacher's Lounge routines and structures throughout all the sessions, because teachers are developing routines and structures around data and assessments. And so we like to revisit that. So that's a lot, but again, every single slide deck has the same basic structure, and you'll see as you browse through them that this format is the same. The feedback surveys, there's one in every folder for every session. These surveys, even though you know your participants, they're important because they give you some feedback on what your participants are getting from it. Take time to review survey responses to ensure that you're meeting the needs of your participants. We oftentimes would mention that we've noticed some feedback, and because of that, we're going to add this to the session, or we're going to do that. And it values the participants' opinion that you're listening to what they need out of this PLC. We have found that it's helpful to keep attendance and take notes during the session to support your session reflections, because we ask facilitators to complete a reflection after everyone, because it helps you to improve your own PLC. The session reflections should be done individually, and then you should review it with your co-facilitator when you're planning your next session. Oftentimes different things stand out for different facilitators on things that you could improve, do better, or change, or something about timing, or maybe one participant's not really participating much and you want to really try to remember to ask that person into the conversation more, things of that nature. And that is also a link in your slide deck at the bottom. I would like to give you a few minutes just to go into the guide and explore the key components, and feel free to unmute and ask us any questions. Okay, so Sandy's got some tips for you now on things that we've learned the hard way along the way that we hope will help you.
Yes, so tip 1, facilitating. It has been tried with only one person. Barbara was brave enough to do that, and it found out it's a lot to manage. So here's what we recommend. 2 facilitators to manage things virtually or in an in-person PLC. We just really feel strongly that you need 2 facilitators. The facilitators can take turns presenting different parts of the session, and the facilitator that is not presenting should be keeping track of the timing, noting any questions that can be used in the teacher's lounge, and setting up materials for group breakout sessions as needed. It's also helpful if meetings are virtual that one facilitator monitors the chat box as well. Tip 2 is to honor the norms. So be sure to model the norms that you set for the participants. All of the norms are important, but we strongly feel that equity of voice and honoring the time are probably the most important norms to uphold and model as facilitators. Be intentional about allowing all the participants to have equity of voice, whether it's during whole group or breakout discussions. You want to also be sure to never run over scheduled time. If a discussion takes longer than planned, be prepared to cut the time on some other part of the presentation or continue a discussion in group chat on the collaboration platform. So honoring the time is very important. Tip 3 is a reminder to use wait time. As a facilitator, you want to refrain from leading the discussion and encourage the participants to be the ones to share their ideas and their questions. It might seem uncomfortable in the beginning when you start using that wait time, but allow for that wait time when you or a participant poses a question, and the participants will get used to that wait time and they'll start jumping in. So give everyone an opportunity to think before actually contributing. Tip 4, pacing. Carefully planning your pacing will help to honor the time frame for the participants. Going in and time stamping the different portions of the sessions will help to keep you on track. And if the discussion is rich and runs over in some parts, you'll already know where you can cut time in other parts. For example, you could say, in the interest of time, we need to move on, but we can continue this discussion in Google Classroom or Slack, or we have time for 2 more comments. And here, tip 5 are suggested ways to complete tasks if the PLC is virtual or in person. And for most of these tasks, the delivery is the same, whether you're virtual or in person. There's only 3 that would be different, and that would be sharing session resources, in-session breakout groups, and co-facilitation tasks. And then in step 6, which is making adjustments from the feedback, you want to keep in mind that you don't want to significantly alter the structure of the session, but sometimes there are some small things that you can adjust to meet the needs of the participants. For example, participants often comment that they wish they had more time for the main discussion. So adjust by mentioning you'll squeeze in as much time as possible in the main discussion by maybe limiting time in other parts, or decide on a place for the discussion to continue after the session, maybe Google Classroom or a discussion thread or Google Chat found in the Gmail menu, or some other, forum for a private discussion between the participants. Oops. And then tip number 7 is the section reflection, and is most effective to complete your session reflections as soon as possible, like right after the session while everything's still fresh in your mind, and then review your reflection in your facilitator's planning meeting to make adjustments for future sessions. So we've got some examples listed of reflection notes that a facilitator might make in one of the sessions, such as saying people are the group spokesperson, or one person dominates the instruction, or maybe you ran out of time and need to adjust pacing, or maybe there are some group norms that aren't being honored, or tech issues, or participants that aren't prepared with session pre-work. So those reflections can be really helpful for future planning. So there is a reminder in the session to do checklist to make a copy of the facilitator slide deck for participants for each session. We provide a participant's copy of the slide deck to support the session work. And then there are also interactive slides that participants can use in their slide deck. So if you'll see the README document found in each one of your folders to make your own copies of any documents that are in the session folder, that is where you can go to make those additional copies.
Okay, so next steps. Thank you, Sandy, for those tips. Next steps, read through and explore your facilitation guide, and it sounds like you have. Plan a schedule for your PLC, invite participants to the PLC, and schedule an assistants new users training date for anybody who is a new user. And we have included that in the guide. You'll notice one of the first links is to training new users. If you have questions, this is our email where the questions will be directed to us or someone else who is familiar with the PLC to support you. So in this webinar, we reviewed how to the facilitation guide, its components, and implementation launch tips. And we'd like to thank you for your time and attention.